join in right when I start reading or right after I introduce is how it normally goes. So I will begin since it's 5 o'clock. So as a preliminary matter, this is Ashley Erisman, Chair of the Nantucket Conservation Commission. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mark Beal.
Aye.
Seth Engelborg.
Aye.
Ian Golding.
Aye.
Dave LaFleur.
Aye.
Maureen Phillips.
Aye.
Joe Topham. Oh, you're muted, Joe.
Aye.
Perfect. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Jeff Carlson.
Aye.
Joanne Dodd.
Aye.
Anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. Like we have Arthur Reed.
Here.
David Haynes.
Here.
Art Gasbarro.
Here.
Paul Santos.
Here.
Kris Horiuchi.
Here.
And Mark Rits.
Here.
Thank you. So good evening. This open meeting of the Nantucket Conservation Commission is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded, so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Nantucket Conservation Commission is convening by video conference via Zoom app, as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comments, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in a conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. And for items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment as follows. Staff will activate the chat feature on YouTube. Members of the public who have comments or questions can use this feature to communicate with the public body. Instructions are on the town's website. And the chair and/or staff will do their best to address questions and comments. And finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. So with that, we will begin the meeting with the public meeting, public comment. Jeff, do we have any public comment at this point? No. Okay, so we will get going with the meeting. The following items are continued. Under notices of intent, we have Nantucket Islands Land Bank, all land bank properties continued until March 11th. We have Weisenberger at 84 Pacamo Road continued until February 25th. Troja Nominee Trust at 26 Easy Street is continued until February 25th. Sweet Meadow Sylvia Lane LLC at 74 Westchester Street is continued until March 11th. 9 E Street LLC at 9 E Street is continued until February 25th. Gold at 3 New Hummock Circle is continued until February 25th. And then under certificates of compliance, we have Sweet Meadow Sylvia Lane LLC at 74 Westchester Street, continued until March 11th. And I think that is it for our continuances. So we will begin tonight's meeting under notices of intent, Nantucket Islands Land Bank at 174 Orange Street and 2 Milestone Road. And this is represented by Art Gasbarro, Kris Horiuchi, and I believe Arthur Reed on the call.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're before you tonight for a very interesting and I think exciting project at the old, known as the Hayes property right by the Milestone Rotary. And we're essentially working with the land bank to transform what was residential uses to an overall public park and public use type of a situation. And the plan that's shown before you tonight has been prepared by Kris and her team, who are on the call with us tonight, based upon a survey that I did and base plan that I provided to them. There's an awfully lot shown here. Much of the property is not actually jurisdictional. We have shown the dashed blue lines, which represent the 25, 50, and 100-foot buffer zones. We did want to show the overall scope of the project, but as you can see, it's essentially around the perimeter of the project, which is within the jurisdiction of the commission. The main aspects of the project is to remove driveways, which is shown as the, I guess I would call it crosshatch stippled area, and restore those to, with native species. Create new access driveways and further away from the resource area, including also then walking paths. There is a fairly large residential structure, which is up at the top of the hill. So most of that structure would be removed from the site. There is a portion of the cottage, so-called, that would remain. There's also a swimming pool within your jurisdiction, which would be completely removed. Large amount of asphalt and driveway, as we mentioned, a shed, some oil tanks, everything associated with the previous residential use of the property, essentially, other than the portion of the cottage and the deck that you see there. Again, extensive restoration plantings, if you will, most of which is, all in the buffer zone. There are also invasive species management proposed, which would be revegetated with native ground cover, as noted. On the eastern side of the property, there is extremely, I guess everything's relative, but a large stand of Japanese knotweed, almost pure monoculture type of a stand that really is actually, I think, a great demonstration of what knotweed can do in terms of that's all there is in that area. And so that would all be, removed and then that area restored with native species, again, all following your best management practices, subject to as listed in the regulations and as conditioned by you. And really the only work proposed within actual resource area, going down from the near where the existing structure is, there was a walking path that went down to the creeks, and there'll be a split rail fence that's installed about halfway down that to sort of stop that activity, or to try to deter that activity of folks continuing down to the water there. And then there would be a path that, the existing path would be maintained partway, just in terms of it does allow some, I think, enjoyment of wetland scenic views by the public in that area. And I believe that's sort of a snapshot of the overall project. We're hoping to get started on it almost right away. And both Kris and I are here to address questions or concerns. I would, before I turn it over, ask if Kris had anything I missed that she wanted to add. Please do. Thank you.
Sure. Well, again, I think, as Art mentioned, this is a really great opportunity. You know, the land bank purchase of this property just is going to enable, public access in the middle of town to, a great view of the back of the harbor. But leading up to that, what we're really hoping to do is to promote public access. There's a serpentine trail system that goes around. We're calling that, kind of an all-person access path. So it'll be handicap accessible, and really just trying to create, opportunities for the public to get through a native landscape, a native meadow, going through different habitat types, woodland, and then out to our open field area overlooking the harbor. So we're really very excited about this, and open to hearing questions. It was recently approved by the Historic District. So in terms of our hardscape materials, and the changes and removals of other structures to kind of open this up for public access was approved.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, I just wanted to add in that also, in case before it gets asked as a question, work has started on some of the aspects that are outside of our jurisdiction already. So if people have driven by there, they may have noticed in the last couple of weeks, the two structures that were outside of the commission's jurisdiction have either been removed or are in the process of being removed. So they've already kind of started on some of the non-jurisdictional pieces, but they haven't touched the areas within jurisdiction. Just want to make that clear before that becomes a question.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Joe, and then Ian.
I saw this go through the HTC and I really like the design. I think they've done a great job. So thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Ian?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Joseph. I'm curious as to why they're retaining the existing cottage rather than removing it, because I see you're putting on, proposed parking for it. And so from my point of view, it detracts somewhat from having it completely parkland.
Thank you, Ian. Does either Art or Kris want to take that question? Or Arthur?
I can't speak to their planning process as to why that portion is remaining.
I believe that there may have been an issue with the HTC on it that was that HTC didn't want to see it removed.
Thank you, Arthur. It looks like Jeff might have some insight.
Yeah, on our original walkthrough on the site with the land bank staff, we were out there with Rachel and Jeff from the land bank. I think Arthur hit the nail on the head. They had some concerns about that portion of the structure being historic, and then the other part of the house had been added on when the larger house was built, and that trying to remove that was going to be problematic. So they thought leaving it there, at least for the short term, made a lot more sense.
Thank you, Arthur. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, everybody. Joe?
Through the chair to Ian. Ian, the mass that's going to remain was the original part of the structure before they added on to the west or east side of the structure, but they're going to bring it back to its glory. It's going to be a beautiful small cottage on that property. I think it's really nice. They've done a really good job and a great plan.
Oh, great. Thank you. As an aside, back in the day, I re-roofed the main building when I was a youngster.
Great piece of history right there. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Maureen?
I was just wondering how long it's anticipated for all the work to be done and the public can start enjoying this. Do you have any idea?
Chris,
Chris?
you want to-
Good.
Go ahead, Chris.
I think our plan is to, if we're able to get our approvals and go through our bidding process and construction process to open this to the public, as early as possible, early summer.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm glad to hear that. And also, I think this is great. This is great.
Maureen, there's some, we've been talking with the land bank, but there's, what is opening. I mean, there's a substantial amount of, restoration work that needs to happen in the landscape. It may be the kind of situation where the hardscape is in, but we'll have to, fence off areas that are being, under restoration so that people can't be walking on them. But the goal is to try to get this open for the summer.
Have a follow-up through the chair. And Kris, it's obviously what you're planning is to bring this back, and there's going to be all native plants, and it's being very carefully put together. And so I assume you've got plans in terms of educating the public as to what is being put in and why, and what's the value of certain plants or what have you. There'll be a educational piece of this.
I think that's always a part of all land bank projects. I don't know specifically, what type of signage or apps or things like that might be incorporated into that. But there's always, this would be a great opportunity because it is so accessible to everyone. People don't have to go really far out. But I think it would be, the intent is to make this a teachable moment.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. You just stole my question because I was going to ask the same thing. So I'm happy to hear there's going to be an education component. Jeff?
Sorry, I just, I have some answers into some of that, but the land bank has been looking into a couple different platforms, and I don't want to steal their thunder, but I think everyone, at least on Nantucket, has been kind of encouraged by the success of the Act Trails app from the Conservation Foundation that they have. And I know the land bank has been looking into the potential of, whether it's, brochure, QR codes, something that's there. But I think they would really like to kind of improve that presence. So I know that's something that they're kind of actively working on developing. So I guess I'll say stay tuned for that, and we'll see how it goes.
That would be a great move forward. I'm excited to hear that. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. Jeff, do we have any comments from the public on this one?
We do not.
Jeff, do we have everything we would need to close?
Yes, you do.
Art and Kris, would you guys like to close?
Yes, please.
Is there a motion to close?
Motion to close.
Motion made by Joe. Is there a second? Looks like seconded by Ian. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur. Oh, you're muted, Dave.
Sorry, I'm having troubles with my key. Aye.
That's all right. It happens to everybody. Phillips,
Bye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a fine craftsman never blames his tools.
I'm gonna leave it on and you guys are gonna hate me for this.
Someone will mute you if you leave it on. That's the problem. All right, so that moves us on to 212 Pulpus Road Nominee Trust at 212 Pulpus Road, and this is represented by David Haynes.
Good evening. Thank you. This was before you last time and reviewed last time. It's an existing there was an existing house here that was in the buffer zone. Part of it was in the buffer zone to the top of a coastal bank and a bordering vegetated wetland. The house was removed, and then they realized that they were in the buffer zone, and they came in with an after the fact filing for the removal. However, they would like to they're planning on building a new house on this exactly same footprint, as I said, and keeping the same limit of work, which is all greater than 50 feet from the top of the bank. We continued it last time, waiting for Natural Heritage review. Natural Heritage came back, anticipated it, and said it was exempt from MISA because it was an existing house and that the work would not adversely impact the rare wildlife habitat. And so they gave it a clean bill of health. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, David. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. Jeff, Jeff?
I just had one comment. I was going to say, thanks to these guys, this is one of the properties where that sailboat washed up a couple years ago out on quays, and they are efforting to have that boat removed in the next couple weeks. I know we brought it up to them when they filed, and we really appreciate them kind of going the extra mile to take care of something that was causing an impact that needed to go away. So thanks to those guys. Just wanted to get that on the public record.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. It's always good to see responsible property owners who want to clean up a mess that, they're not responsible for. So definitely thank you. Jeff, I'm assuming we have everything we need to close since we heard from Heritage.
Yes.
Okay. David, would you like to close?
Yes, please.
Is there a motion to close? Motion made by Maureen, seconded by Mark. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur. Oh, I couldn't hear you.
Aye, aye.
There we
That's
go.
right.
Maureen.
Aye.
And Topham.
Aye.
Lost my concentration there with the mic. So that carries unanimously. Thank you, David.
Does sign language count if necessary?
It's a good question.
I'd be afraid of some of the sign language we might get, Ian.
True story. All right, so that moves us on to Horiuchi at 174 Cliff Road, represented by Mark Rits.
Good evening, Mark Rits from Site Design, representing the applicants at 174 Cliff. This property was before you guys a year or two ago for some fairly substantial site work, a pool, an addition, some reconfiguration. There are two wetlands on the property. One is kind of off to the southeast and is a natural wetland system. The other one is a small man-made pond on the northeast of the property. The pond is not lined, so it does function as a wetland and is jurisdictional. Both resource areas had been previously delineated and approved. As part of the last filing, we moved a driveway further away from that pond and restored some buffer vegetation in the 25-foot buffer and a little bit in the 50-foot buffer. What we are before you with this evening is a request to construct a barn on the far side of the driveway, entirely outside of the 50-foot buffer. I don't know if you guys did a site visit, but the location of the barn had actually been staked, and it's shown here on the plan. Everything is entirely outside of the 50. Most of the barn is in previously landscaped lawn area with a little bit into some of the shrub vegetation around the lawn. That's pretty much all we have on this one.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. Jeff, do we have any comments from the public on this one? Okay, do we have everything we need to close?
We do. And just before you guys do, I would say we did do a site visit and confirmed all the stuff in the site's in compliance. So just to
Thank you.
make sure that's done. But you're
Mark,
getting close.
Mark, would you like to close?
Yes, please.
Is there a motion?
Motion to
Motion
close.
made by Maureen, seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Kurtzman, I, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Hi.
Topham.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
And that moves us on in the public meeting to request for determination. We have Cathcart Harborview LLC at 2, 4, and 4.5 Cathcart Road, represented by Mark Rits.
Good evening. Once again, Mark Rits from Site Design, representing the applicants at 2, 4, and 4.5 Cathcart. It's a fairly extensive piece of property. It's actually several parcels with some fairly odd shapes to them. A portion of the property extends all the way out to Boston Ave slash Monomoy Road, with the bulk of the property fronting out on Cathcart. There's an extensive wetland system on parts of the property. The wetland was delineated by Brian Madden, I think late last year, before there was snow and ice on the ground. And he delineated the entire section kind of on the Cathcart side and also a small section on the Boston Ave side. All the wetland flags were survey located, site plan provided. The applicant is requesting to do some brush cutting up to the 50-foot buffer in preparation for some of the site work that they'll be coming back to the commission for requesting later on as part of an NOI. All of the brush cutting proposed is actually proposed up to the 50 on both sides of the property. No other work is proposed at this time. That's pretty much it.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Seth, and then Ian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mark, if you may, could you describe a little bit about the vegetation that's going to be managed? Is it mostly shrubs or is it trees or what's on site?
It's a mix of shrubs and trees, an assortment of both. It's fairly well vegetated between the 50 and 100-foot buffer, and then very densely vegetated from the 50 into the wetland. Nearly nothing is impenetrable to Madden and his crazy surveyors, but nearly impenetrable to sort of normal traffic. But between the 50 and the 100, it's a mix of shrubs and trees.
Thank you, Mark. Do you have any follow-up, Seth, or is that it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on what the applicant is proposing to do later, which I know we don't really know, but I would prefer to see some of the larger trees maintained now until a later submission. We could consider dealing with those at a later time, but for this, I would prefer to see large trees maintained while the applicant still is figuring out what they want to do with their site plan.
Thank you, Seth. I think that's a great idea. Ian, you had a comment or question?
Well, I mirror Seth's questions, and I assume, Mark, you're referring to all three properties?
Yes.
Yeah, and I would actually like to see a specific delineation on all three properties of what's between the 50 and the 100, because otherwise, what's the point in having 100 in our jurisdiction? So I share Seth's concern, or perhaps I should speak for myself. My concern is that it's going to be raised, and I don't want to see that. And I want to actually have concrete proof of what they're going to do, since we've had some of these issues in the past where it's proved to be a rather elastic permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian.
Well,
Um,
if I may,
Yep.
I mean, they would like to clear cut up to the 50. There's no, ambiguity about it. And it is fairly standard practice for applicants to propose development and landscaping up to the 50-foot buffer on properties. They'd like to clear up to the 50.
Thank you, Mark. Jeff?
Sorry about that. So I just wanted to add it really quickly. We did review the delineation. I wish this would have been submitted sooner because I got to go out in the snow to go check the wetland line and dig holes in frozen ground. It was
I'm sorry.
one of the better ones to do, but it's all right. But keep in mind too, and I know, Mark can respond if he wants to. You guys do have the ability, if you want to issue, the -3 to allow the work, you do have the ability to condition that. So you could condition some of the conditions we've seen before to keep trees over a certain size if that's a concern, and then they could come back with their regular plan to deal with it. But that's certainly an option for you all.
Thank you, Jeff, for reminding us of that. And Jeff, this is, I guess, a question for you. Is any of this like natural heritage area? It's just such a large kind of undeveloped tract of land.
Give me 1 second to just.
We actually show the natural heritage line on our plan, and it very closely, I'm just trying to tease out which line it is. It is the heavy weight, large dashed line. You can see it extending kind of on the northern, on the top of the page. The most there's a label, a limit of NHESP habitat, and Joe, I don't know if you can scroll to the top of the plan. Yeah, right there. And if you follow that line down, it hugs the 25-foot buffer pretty much all the way down the plan. There's one point where I think it goes where there are a few points where it comes near the 50-foot buffer, but it does not cross the 50-foot buffer. On the top portion of number 2 Cathcart, it just touches the 50-foot buffer right there, but it does not. We're not proposing any work within any mapped heritage habitat.
Thank you, Mark. Ian?
So while Mark wants to imply that because it's customary to allow brush cutting up to the 50, normally it's after there's actually a house. After the construction, the footprint of the construction has been delineated. And I would actually like to see, I'd like to get out there and I would like to actually see the trees of the diameter that we want to see. I would actually see them, I would like to see it put on this map in advance before we go further with this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ian. I was going to kind of save this comment for commissioners' comments, but I think I'll bring it out now. I am very concerned about some of the kind of landscape practices on Nantucket with the just assuming that we need to clear to certain lines rather than, really looking at the plants retaining soil as well, because the soil structure is very important. And I think these newer designs that come in just assumed a clear cut to a line and it's okay. And I do think we really need to reevaluate that practice because it is incredibly damaging in the long term to our resource areas. And especially with properties this large, it is questionable whether it's necessary to truly clear cut all the way to the 50. I know that the client wants it, but is it really necessary? And I think we need to start really looking at that a little bit more closely. And I agree that we should be retaining large trees for their habitat value, certainly.
There's, I mean, I haven't reread the regs recently, but there's very little in the regs that really, speak to that at this point. And in terms of, obviously, all native vegetation has habitat value, but the regulations specifically speak about maintaining habitat for rare and endangered species, and we're outside of any rare or endangered species mapped habitat. I mean, if the commission would like us to leave larger trees intact at this point, we'd be happy to do so, but we would like to get rid of at least the underbrush if we're gonna have to leave the trees in place.
Yeah, Seth?
It would take me a little bit of time to pull up the exact part of the regulations that is relevant, but I know for sure one of the protected interests of our local regulations in bordering vegetative wetlands is protecting wildlife habitat. And I see on your delineation forms that you have red cedars, eastern red cedars, as a significant tree coverage. It's a slow growing tree species which provides ample habitat for birds, bats, things like that. So I think that there is justification on the wildlife habitat protected interests in terms of doing the things that we've asked.
Thank you, Seth. Any other thoughts or questions from commissioners? Mark?
Yeah, I just support I echo the other commissioners' concerns. I think a site visit will be helpful for me to see what actually we're going to be cutting down. And I think it'll be helpful to be on site, and so we know what we're doing there, what we're approving.
Thank you, Mark. I think a site visit would be a good idea.
I agree.
I agree.
All right, it looks like many of us want a site visit. Mark Ritz?
How about, we like our delineation. How about we withdraw the portion requesting brush cutting at this point, and we'll come back with that when we come back with NOIs for the project. We'd really like to get our delineation on paper for additional future steps at this point. So we'll withdraw our request to brush cut up to the 50 at this point.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Ian, you have a comment or question?
Oh, I just would like to thank Mark for withdrawing under the circumstances, because I think you're taking into our concerns. So thank you.
Yes, I would agree. Thank you, Mark. So Jeff, with that in mind, what would staff's recommendation be for this one?
I think given that we recommend the positive 2A confirming the resource area boundaries as shown on the plan of record.
Okay. Would somebody like to make that motion to confirm the resource area boundaries? Motion made by Mark. Looks like seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal.
Aye.
Engelborg.
Aye.
Harrisman, aye. Golding.
Aye.
LaFleur.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
That moves us on to Nicholas Ray at 37 Somerset Road, represented by Art Gasbarro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm before you tonight with an application for work within the buffer zone to an isolated vegetated wetland. And that work involves a small addition to an existing structure, which is shown in red on the plan. Also shown in red is the 25, 50, and 100-foot buffer zones. The proposed work is approximately 70 feet away from the resource area within an existing landscaped area. The commission may recall that this was a site where there had been some brush cutting by a previous owner, and there was a requirement that posts be installed, and those were installed and are shown as the darker red dots on the plan. And those are essentially to delineate the future no disturb area on this property. And that's really it. Just that the addition onto the house is the extent of the work.
Thank you, Art. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Ian?
The drawings dating to 84 make me positively nostalgic. So,
Drawings dated to 84.
Did you do any roofing work, Ian?
not on this one, no. But I did do drawings that look somewhat like that, I have to confess.
Just to clarify, you're talking about the HDC drawings that were provided, correct?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Art, I didn't make myself clear.
It's never good when I feel like you stumped Art and I both at the same time, and I was like,
I apologize.
Okay. I thought maybe just with 2021, I'm still misdating things sometimes.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. Jeff, what is staff's recommendation for this one?
We would recommend that -3 allowing the work without a notice of intent.
Great, thank you. Would somebody like to make that motion?
Motion.
A motion made by Joe. Is there a second? Seconded by Ian. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Art.
Thank you.
And that moves us on to certificates of compliance. We have 39 Hulbert LLC at 39 Hulbert Avenue, represented by Paul Santos. Should we take both of these together?
Yeah, I think that's fine. Our staff recommendation will be pretty similar for both, but I think it's easier to do them all at once.
Okay, so we have SE 483035 and SE 482503. And I'll give it to you, Paul.
Okay, thank you. Paul Santos on behalf of 39 Hulbert LLC, property owner at 39 Hulbert Avenue. This is a project that has spanned a number of years, which was essentially a redevelopment of an existing parcel of land that was originally owned by the Cross family. And that involved renovation of the existing dwelling, a construction of a new cottage, and a construction of a garage, all with associated site work, grading, and utilities. The plan that you have before you is an as-built drawing. I've also submitted 3 elevation certificates, one for each of the 3 structures. They have all been through this process, and as part of these orders, all been constructed and or elevated to be compliant with the flood zone standards. And in fact, the 2-story dwelling and the 2-story cottage are actually compliant with the current 9th edition of the building code. So they've been constructed with a first floor, which is 1 foot above the flood elevation. Foundation systems are all essentially a crawl space with complete flood venting. All the flood vents are at the grades originally proposed. There was an actual condition in the order that said the certificates had to be submitted and the flood vents had to be certified as accurate, and they are. With regard to the project itself, 2503 was an original order. It was actually amended 3 times. I believe had 2 minor modifications. 23305 was an original order with 1 minor modification. All the work has been done in substantial compliance with the order, and the property has been used and occupied for a number of years now. Again, this is Hulbert Avenue. It's on the harbor side. The regulated under your jurisdiction were land subject to coastal storm flowage. And in this case here, we did also have a 25, 50, and 100-foot buffer zone from the bulkhead, which acts as a coastal bank or a policy coastal bank. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. And we'll go from there. Actually, part of this property was a paper road, or we've acquired part of the paper road, but this is there's a public access area to the right of this property with a path that goes down, I believe, to there's some boat racks or kayak racks kind of to the right side of this property that was all taking place since this property was originally acquired too. And happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Paul. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. Jeff, has staff been out to check the site?
Yes, and we would agree that it's in substantial compliance, but we would recommend that on SE 483035, that conditions 19 and 20 be continued. One is for exterior lighting, and then 20 is for any documentation of fertilizer that's used. And then ironically on the other one, condition 19, that doesn't permit fertilizer or irrigation on the order. So kind of crosses out the one, but just in case, thought we'd be covered.
Okay, thank you for that recommendation. Would somebody like to make a motion to issue the cert with ongoing conditions 19 and 20 on the 3035 cert? And Jeff, I want to make sure I heard you correct, ongoing condition 19 on the 2503 cert.
Correct.
Motion made by Dave, seconded by Seth. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Fleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
And that moves us on to Chesley, formerly 32 Westchester, portion lot C.
So
Yep, go ahead, Jeff.
I got this one. So this is one that they've never done the work, and the order needs to be closed out. So we're just we're recommending issuing it as an invalid order of conditions.
Thank you. Would somebody like to make that motion to invalidate the order of conditions? Motion made by Mark.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what Jeff said about the order.
Oh, Jeff, can you repeat that?
Yeah, they're just requesting to invalidate the order because they're not doing the work and they don't have plans to do it.
I move to accept the invalidation.
Thank you, Ian. Is there a second? Seconded by Dave. So I roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. And that moves us on to Taconic Partners Nominee Trust at 4 Brant Point Road, and this is a reissue.
Sadly, this is the second reissue, so they apparently can't figure out how to get it recorded. So we're just recommending that it be reissued for them to satisfy that permitting requirement.
Okay, so is there a motion to reissue the certificate? Motion made by Seth. Is there a second? Seconded by Maureen. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Sorry. Aye.
and Topham.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. And that moves us on to orders of conditions. Jeff emailed them out earlier, so hopefully everybody got those. And we will begin with 174 Orange Street and 2 Milestone Road, which is the Nantucket Islands Land Bank property.
All right, so just to kind of walk everyone through it, it's not that long. I really only included kind of our invasive species and kind of monitoring conditions. Everything else seemed fairly straightforward and without any really waivers needed for anything.
Are there any questions or amendments from commissioners? Probably need a minute to read it over.
I do have one correction. I apologize. In condition 22, I meant to put knotweed, and just out of bad habit, I wrote Phragmites. Sorry. That's it.
They're both evil invasive, so we can't fault you.
Sometimes I feel like when I'm rewriting the invasive conditions, Phragmites is always the first one that pops into my head because I feel like we see it the most, and I probably just autopilot Phragmites instead of knotweed.
If there are no additions or amendments, would somebody like to approve as amended?
Approve as amended.
So I'll give Joe the motion and Dave the second. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Popham.
Aye.
That carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm excited for this new park. That moves us on to 212 Pulpus Road Nominee Trust at 212 Pulpus Road.
So this was for the project that was the after the fact demolition and rebuild that we were waiting for Heritage for. I don't think I had any fancy conditions for this. Sorry, my computer's going slow. No, I didn't, except for I included those 2 additional findings that we've been adding now that we're supposed to be adding because it is work within the buffer zone to a coastal bank. That just kind of clarifies that that structure is not eligible for a coastal engineering structure because it's a new structure.
Thank you, Jeff. Ian?
Yes. So is there currently a bulkhead there or a coastal engineering structure?
No,
Okay, thank you.
but we're supposed to be under the state regulation in our local bylaw, including this condition now related to banks. And it was in the regulations and they've clarified that we should be making sure that we include it in the order. So we put it in as findings because that way if it doesn't get carried forward as a condition, it's still a finding and they're still obligated to be beholden to that. So it's just more memorializing that if that bank erodes, honestly, I think by the time this structure is threatened by that, we'll be like 3 Concom administrators later than now. But just in case it comes up that they're not eligible for a CES under the current regulatory structure.
Thank you, because the reason why I asked is because I wondered whether we should add requires that no coastal engineering structure, et cetera, shall be permitted or renewed. And so, but clearly it's moot here. That's why I asked.
Thank you, Ian. It's a very valid question.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mark?
I don't suppose we have any jurisdiction. I'm troubled. This is one of the prettiest little houses you've ever seen from the water. 1-story, beautiful house. And I wonder if we're going to see a 2-story monster on the same footprint, I realize, but I imagine it'll go up rather than out. I love this house. It was spectacular.
I unfortunately
HTC.
can't answer that question.
HTC, do their job, please.
I totally second what Mark said. And back in the day, they called me when my Labrador Retriever had strayed over there, and they were absolutely delightful. So I would be sad to see some eyesore built there myself.
Lacking jurisdiction.
Yeah.
All right. Any other comments or questions from commissioners? Looks like no. So is there a motion to issue as drafted?
Issue. Oops.
Maureen made the motion. It looks like seconded by Dave. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. And that moves us on to Joseph Saluti at 174 Cliff Road.
Sorry, one second, guys. My apparently my dial-up internet here is misbehaving, but I don't believe I had any conditions for this. This one also seemed fairly straightforward as far as adding the barn next to the driveway.
Jeff, my only question, I just used to work on this site. I think the barn is going to be like elevated compared to that pond. And I just didn't know if we needed the lighting condition on there to not have lighting towards the resource area.
It definitely sits up on a hill, right? So it comes up pretty drastically and then flattens out. I mean, we could certainly have that condition 19 that all exterior lighting is to be directed away from the resource area.
Ashley,
Yes.
if I may go back with Jeff for a moment to the 212 Pulpus Road one, there's a minor typographical error that I mentioned earlier. In additional findings, paragraph 3, the very last sentence needs to read, at any time in the future to protect the project allowed under this order of conditions. The word under is missing, I believe.
Thank you, Mark.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Mark.
I actually read these things from time to time.
So Jeff, do we need to go back and revote that one as amended?
No, I'll just fix it as a Scribner's there. That should be fine. I usually proofread them before I print them again anyway, so I may have caught it, but I certainly appreciate my other grammar police catching my errors from time to time.
Any other thoughts on the 174 Cliff Road? Looks like no. So is there a motion to approve as amended?
So moved.
So motion made by Ian, seconded by Mark. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. And that brings us to other business, approval of minutes from January 28th, 2021. Has everybody had a chance to, oh, Ian?
Oh, just a couple of minor points, and they've been amended. But in the discussion of clear, what was the name of, I'm forgetting the name of the weed killer.
Clearcast.
Clearcast, thank you. It should read inert ingredients rather than nerve ingredients. And so Terry's corrected it. And also Larrabee was misspelled, and I believe that's already been corrected as well. So I would like to make a motion to approve as amended.
Thank you, Ian. Is there a second to that? Seconded by Maureen. So by roll vote, Beal. Almost looks like he's frozen though. So we'll move on. Engelborg,
Aye.
Arison, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
So that carries with Commissioner Beal kind of out for the moment. That moves us on to reports. We have crack.
Well, the last meeting was taken up, of course, with the Arcadis contract with the town on SBPF and Baxter Road, which everybody's aware of. So that was it.
Thank you, Ian. CPC.
Jeff, comment.
Real quickly on that for Ian, on that that Arcadis project, and after kind of reviewing it too and going through it, I know at some point Arcadis is going to want to set up a time to speak to the commission about that area. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there that probably on a future agenda here, they're going to want to have some level of discussion with you guys about Baxter Road and kind of get your thoughts. So just to put everyone on notice to be thinking about it.
Thank you, Jeff. It looks like Seth has a question.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to bring that up to see if we were going to get contacted. So it's good to know we are. And in the meantime, Ian, if you get updates, just keep us informed. It would be great as to how they're moving forward with the scope of that project.
Sure. We weren't consulted to begin with, which in fact our chair noted and wished we had been. And have you read the contract with town, what they're going to do? Do you want me to ask Jeff to post that, or has everybody seen it?
I think it would be good for Jeff to circulate it around just so we all have it at the same time, kind of documented that we've received it. Is that possible, Jeff?
Yeah, I'll happily. I'll send you, because I know there are 2 documents. There's the specific contract with the town, and then there's also the kind of the scope of services that go with it too. So I'll make sure that it's complete and everyone has both pieces of it if it's been separated. So
thank you, Jeff.
definitely. It won't maybe happen tonight, but that's by some point tomorrow. Everyone will have it.
Thank you. So now we'll move on to CPC.
Nothing to report.
All right. NP and EDC.
Nothing to report.
Great. Then we have monitoring reports that we got from Nantucket Conservation Foundation, Shimo Pond Road, the Pest House Pond area. I don't know if everybody had a chance to look at those.
Ashley, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
I've lost my my microphone somehow. I can't hear you on my iPad or my computer, so something's going wrong. So I'll keep working on it. But if you call for me to vote, I'll be very quiet.
Okay. Well, we can hear you through. I don't know if you're on your phone now or what, but we do have audio for you. So thank you. Are there any questions about the Pest House Pond?
If anyone does, feel free to email them in, and I can forward them to Karen as well.
Yeah.
So.
Looks like Seth maybe had a question or comment.
Yeah, not really a question per se, but it's very interesting to see that they are documenting widgeon grass at that site, which for the people who don't know is a extremely important submerged aquatic vegetation on the similar status to what eelgrass would be in a saltwater system. Widgeon grass is equally as important for freshwater brackish system. So that is extremely positive, productive result there, which will be good to follow moving forward.
Thank you for highlighting that, Seth. That's really great. All right. So again, if there's any questions about that, email Jeff and he can forward them on. And that moves us on to enforcement updates.
Just got one tonight. We had one of our tickets, it looks like, that we sent to the Kellys on Baxter Road, was the house with all that's there. They have contested that, and we have, let me pull, I don't want to say we, but I have a hearing that looks like on the 2nd of March with the court magistrate about that ticket. So I will keep everyone posted for what that is. I just need to get a little bit more detail from Detective Kelly from the police station who handles that from us. But I will definitely be appearing and making sure that they are held responsible for their violation.
Thank you, Jeff. That moves us on to commissioners' comments. Any comments from commissioners? Seth and then Ian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have 2 comments. I'll try to be short as possible because I know we want to wrap this up. But the first is that on Monday, the Linda Loring Nature Foundation, which I will be transparent in saying that I work for, so this isn't supposed to be a promotional piece or anything. This is strictly personal opinion. There was a science pub talk that they put on about the Yard Features Project. It's a collaboration of researchers in 6 cities throughout the country who are looking at ways to examine yards as a ecosystem rather than just as a residential piece of property, and thinking about ways to move forward with incorporating native biodiversity into those sites. If it is applicable, I'm happy to share the link to that talk. I can post it in the chat or on the YouTube or send it to Jeff, however would be acceptable. Again, I said I work for that organization, so I'm not trying to promote it or anything. I just think personally it was a really effective talk and hits on a lot of issues that we're dealing with through the Concom, especially given the amount of residential sites we work with, how to best move forward in terms of getting better biodiversity in those areas would be important to consider. So Jeff, if that's something I'm able to share, I'm happy to do that.
Absolutely, yeah. If you just email me the link, Seth, I'll make sure I send that around too.
Great, thank you. And then the second is a little bit possibly more difficult to get around, but I've been thinking a bit about our limitations in constructing additional regulations outside of what we're thinking of as jurisdictional areas. And it's my understanding that although a lot of our work is focused on the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act and the Nantucket Local Wetlands Bylaw, the act that actually enables conservation commissions is neither of those. It's a separate act, the Massachusetts Conservation Commission Act, which precedes both of those regulations. And I know off islands, conservation commissions deal with not only wetlands regulations, but a variety of other things related to environmental protection, including in some towns, conservation commissions actually purchase and hold land. And I know as part of the scope of what a conservation commission is in general across the state, that there is the possibility to think a little bit more holistically about how we're putting regulations and policies into place that focus on environmental protection in general, rather than just in wetland resource areas. And I think about some of the things that we deal with, like wanting to have landscapers use native plants, or wanting to get better regulations on pools if they're on a site but not in a wetland resource area. And I was just wondering if it would be possible to go back and look at that enabling legislation and see really if we have abilities to make our regulations more expansive than our current focus is. If it's not, and maybe town council needs to weigh in here, if I'm understanding that wrong, that's fine, but I think we should consider it so that we're not limiting our scope or our vision of what's possible without kind of considering what we can and cannot regulate.
Thank you, Seth.
I'll let Maureen go first.
Through the chair, Seth, but you said there are other Concoms which are doing exactly what you're proposing we might look into doing.
Yeah, I mean, off island, there are Concoms that definitely hold conservation easements, purchase land, put out conservation master plans, educational signage, all sorts of stuff related to their town conservation policies that don't necessarily focus on wetland conservation only. I don't know if they're doing everything that we would maybe consider wanting to do, but there are definitely conservation commissions who apply their work to a broader scale, holistic approach to ecosystem protection rather than just focusing on wetland regulations.
Well, then it would seem to me that it's certainly potentially available then to us. I mean, it's the same act for every conservation commission, in the Commonwealth. So to look at things more broadly may well be a way to try and get at some of the issues that are, I think, bother us all a lot in terms of certain limitations. And if we can have more impact on things like even landscaping, that would be that would be a good thing. So I think we should look into that. I would definitely support that.
Yeah, and if I may, just one last piece. You know, we might look at it, and town council might look at it and say, you might not be able to enact regulations in these areas, but you can put out policies or educational guidance.
Mm-hmm.
And even doing that is possibly effective in trying to reach some of the goals we're talking about. So I would just like to see a little bit more of a look into whether some of those things are feasible for us as a commission or not.
Thank you for bringing this up, Seth. Ian, I'll go to you in 1 second. I was thinking the same thing when I was going to talk about like the landscaping issues and about, you know, how we can be more of a presence in the community to make that change. And I think it is worth talking to George to see, you know, just like what we can promote, who we can interact with, if we can actually have legislation, or if we need to propose something for a town meeting, you know, what we need to do to move forward, to have better protections in our open space in general, to protect the habitats and ecosystem values out there. So thank you for bringing this up. Ian?
So thank you, Madam Chair. I have 2 points I'd like to make, and the first is building on what Seth has said. You know, I feel we're sort of stalled. This is to Jeff. Jeff, I feel we're sort of stalled on the update of our regulations. You know, I mean, this has been going on for years, and we've sent in a variety of suggestions. And so where do we stand? I realize COVID has made things difficult at Natural Resources. So don't get me wrong, but this Cathcart Harbor View is a good example of why, if we had updated our regulations, we might be able to protect what we all want to protect at a greater level.
Totally. So, all right, I'm going to kind of unpack kind of the series of comments that we have there. So I'll get back to Ian's kind of at the end. So the Conservation Commission Act does allow for a few more things. And just to kind of step through, and this is also having kind of talked to Dirk before when I started with the commission, a lot of the things that the commission is enabled to do by the act, some of those responsibilities at the time, just for, you know, for staffing and funding and things, some of those things fell onto, as far as like conservation restrictions and acquisition of properties and things, kind of fell into the land bank, and the town had more of a policy where those were being held by the land bank for a pretty substantial amount of time, and that's kind of still where it sits. But as far as like the commission definitely has a lot of, you know, broad reach to be able to develop any kind of educational materials or outreach materials. And they don't have to be related to wetlands. It just has to be to the area of open space. I tend to agree that, and we can get, it will probably be Greg Corbo that comes for it and not George. George tends to be a little bit more focused on litigation and things. Excuse me again. But the idea of regulating spaces that aren't allowed under the Wetlands Protection Act gets a little trickier. That being said, I think the town is, if you wanted to, you could probably draft like a protection of open spaces bylaw to go to town meeting that designates the commission as the authority to regulate that bylaw. And you could regulate that locally a little bit more, or in conjunction with, you know, zoning or something that's there. So I think there's some opportunity there, but we can definitely try to schedule a time for them to review the Conservation Commission Act with the commission. Strangely enough, this will be kind of interesting too. This will tell you where people were thinking. The Mass Conservation Commission Act, I believe, was originally approved through the Mass Legislature, I believe in 1959, 1958, 1959.
57.
57. I knew I'd get close. And the Mass Wetlands Protection Act didn't even come to be until 1972. So they were ahead with the commission, and they built in the Wetlands Protection Act is what established their authority to regulate that through conservation commissions. but conservation commissions had already been established for the protection essentially of environmentally important areas and open spaces. I believe how it had read specifically at the time. So we can definitely try to set that up. To get to the regulations, again, that's on me for that stalling a bit. We just got so tied up with the rollover in the year and that thing there, and a few of the other issues that were outstanding, that it just kept getting bumped because of time, and our agendas were just ginormous. So I promise we'll get back on track. I know everyone sent in comments, and we also had a couple outstanding questions that we've been filtering through kind of our MACC network, and a few other things that are there. And oddly enough, just this week alone, I believe it was the conservation agent from Mashpee that sent a question into that group. Mashpee is considering asking the state about revisiting the $300 non-criminal cap for violations, because they don't feel that it's to scale with what's going on. So we kind of hopped on and said, we're totally in. And the folks at Martha's Vineyard kind of said the same thing that we did, where we were like, $300 isn't even like a warm-up fine out where we are. It's not even like, there are people here that would pay the $300 a day just to do what they're doing and not really care. So we'll see if that gets any traction for that group. If MACC hops on board, it's always a good start to get there, or at least start having that discussion and see if there are any of the Mass state legislatures that are interested in kind of taking up that cause a little bit to discuss that. So I'll definitely keep everyone posted where that goes, because I think that's, I feel like that fine was originally set in like 1974 and hasn't been touched since then. And it's a difficult number for probably most of the Commonwealth as far as what that penalty is. So, I'll get a summary of all of the regulations that we have proposed and people out. I'll get that to you guys prior to our next meeting, just to at least get caught up on, and then we'll try to reschedule a special regulatory hearing from there, if that's fair for everybody.
Thank you, Jeff, for that
Try to get
update.
booted.
And thank you, Ian, for bringing it up and keeping it on the top of our list, because it is important.
Thank you, Jeff.
No problem.
Are there any other commissioners' comments? I know I kind of touched on mine already, but I just have really big concerns, especially after kind of a comment that was made at our last meeting that the commission is out of touch with what's happening in the landscape world and the plants that are used. And I'm very concerned that by the time some of these plants are labeled as invasive, it's too late for Nantucket. And, you know, we're an island with unique biodiversity, and there's got to be some way to get education to these landscapers, because they're kind of a unique industry in the sense that there is no continuing education piece and so many rogue companies, because there's so much information that's come out in the last 20 years about, you know, some of these plants being potentially invasive. And on Nantucket, we need to stop it early, because again, our unique biodiversity is really threatened by all the plant material that gets shipped here. So I think Seth's comment earlier is a way to maybe get there. But I definitely think that's a piece we need to work on, because it's an island-wide issue. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think that education moving forward is extremely important. Understanding how invasive plants get listed in Massachusetts is actually a sort of slow process. The agency who's involved in making that determination is MIPAG, Massachusetts Invasive Plant Action Group, maybe, or something like that. And in order for them to document a species as being invasive, they actually have to have occurrences of data from specific locations that show that this plant is escaping into minimally managed areas. So without that data, MyPAG is not able to make any determination on the invasiveness of a plant. I think that there may be things that the Nantucket Conservation Commission is able to do on a shorter term that assess some of the issues, but there is actually one thing that all of us can do ourselves as well. There's a citizen science app called Outsmart Invasive Species. It's linked to EdMaps, which is the official database that the Massachusetts state uses to make determinations on whether plants are invasive. So if you go and download this app on your phone and document where you're seeing non-native horticultural plants escaping, that data gets sent directly to the Massachusetts database. And if there is enough occurrences in that database, the state will set a hearing to think about identifying whether that plant is invasive or not. So I can happily share that app around as well. I'll send it to Jeff so that people can use it. But that's something that you can do personally. I don't know if just the 7 of us are going to collect enough data to get Massachusetts MyPAG to pay attention or not, but any data is better than none. So if you see these plants in areas that they're not supposed to be, definitely document their occurrence, and hopefully it'll make a difference.
Thank you, Seth. That sounds like a great tool that we can use for sure. Any other commissioners' comments before we move on to administrator staff reports? Looks like no. Jeff, do you have anything to report? Oh, you're muted.
No, I do. Sorry, I'm just trying to get my notes to go over there. So just to kind of recap a few things and a few requests that we've had in as well related to our favorite topic. I think we've found a date for both an executive session and for the annual reports from SBPF. They're separate dates, so don't everyone panic. But right now, I think Joanne's been sending around that we're looking at March 22nd for that annual report. To get that going, I know we had the delay with people canceling, and I'll go fast so Fig doesn't get too restless. But so that's coming up. With that being said, I know we've had a couple requests, and I know I had the occasion to speak to George yesterday. George would also like to get an update to the commission in executive session. And I think the date that we've targeted for that is to try to do it before our regular meeting on March 11th. So to have like an executive session at 4 and then the regular meeting at 5 to have that hour to go through it and get your guys' question answered. And if we need to continue, we certainly can. But that date worked for George, number one, which is always tricky, but it's also a date that I was guesstimating that most everyone would be available for it because everyone should hopefully have been planning to have been on at 5. So I didn't schedule any bit in front of 4 because I know people have work and things like that, so I didn't want to push it. But excuse me, again, wanted to get that on the radar for everybody as far as those 2 dates.
Thank you, Jeff, for getting that executive session penciled in. I think that's a great one. And I think the March 22nd date was mentioned to us maybe last meeting or via email.
Yes, we've been trying to do it. One of the problems that we have is in this wonderful remote world that they're in, it's not as simple as it used to be where like you could just find a meeting room and have a public meeting and just go from there, is especially for meetings that I think there's a high public interest. And I think anything with the Bluff obviously has a pretty heavy attendance load to it, at least it historically has. There's limited capacity to get through NCTV and onto YouTube and some of those things that are there, and competing on the schedule for it gets pretty tough. So we have looked all through February and just didn't have, outside of us having like a meeting on, a Saturday or a Sunday, which I know is not desirable for anybody. it gets tough because there's just between select board and health and planning and zoning and HTC, there's just not a lot of spaces. And that's where we started to push, and then coupled in with, making sure that, Greg Berman's available and George is available, and, the permit holder in this case is available. You just run out of dates really fast. So that's how we kind of landed on that date of the 22nd as a potential date. We do have some dates reserved just in case after that, in case that doesn't work. But before people get their heart set on those, we thought we would start with this one. And if we have to move, we can go to some of our backups. Or if it takes more than one night, we have some stuff past the 22nd in reserve to hopefully accommodate that if necessary. Or if worse comes to worse, we might be able to use it for a regulatory hearing or something.
Thank you, Jeff. And Joe, I'm sure played a part in scheduling too. So thank you, both of you.
That's pretty much all Joanne. I just say we need to get the scheduled, find some time, and Joe magically makes it happen. So, but that's it for me. I don't think I have too much else to add.
All right. Well, that's it. Would somebody like to make a motion to adjourn?
Don't all raise your hands at once.
Like Ian's got it. Is there a second? Dave got the second. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you,
care,
everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Let's see that puppy, Ashley.
All right. I can try and let
Where's that puppy? Come on. Oh.
It's getting bigger.
Oh, I love it.
Fig.
Adorable.
Absolutely.
She can't figure it out.